First story. My wife wanted an open marriage and gave me an ultimatum. But now that I've found someone, she wants to change the rules. The unexpected twist that left me at a crossroads. 2.5 years ago, my world turned upside down when my wife, Emily, sat me down for a conversation that would change everything. She told me she wanted to open our marriage. It wasn't framed as a suggestion or a casual idea. It felt more like an ultimatum. Her tone and the weight of her words made it clear. If I didn't agree, our marriage might end. I'll be honest. I felt blindsided. We had been together for over a decade, built a life, and were raising 2 amazing kids. I worked long hours to provide for our family, and while things weren't perfect, I never thought we were at a breaking point. But the thought of divorce terrified me, splitting up our family, the financial and emotional toll, and the effect it would have on our children. So, after a lot of soul-searching, I reluctantly said yes. I had conditions, though. I told Emily I wanted to keep things as clean as possible. No dating mutual friends, colleagues, acquaintances, or anyone in our family's social circle. No bringing dates into our home. Most importantly, I wanted everything to remain private, for the sake of our kids and my sanity. She agreed to these terms, and just like that, our marriage became something I never thought it would be. For the next 2 years, I threw myself into my work and my kids. My schedule was grueling, sometimes over 70 hours a week. But I didn't mind. It was easier to focus on providing for my family than to dwell on what Emily might be doing when I wasn't around. I moved into the guest room, unable to stomach the thought of her sharing our bed with someone else. It wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a partnership for raising kids. I avoided asking questions about her personal life. Frankly, I didn't want to know. Meanwhile, Emily seemed to adjust well to our new arrangement. She had her dates and her social life, while I buried myself in responsibilities. But I kept a goal in mind: to secure a stable future for our children. By this summer, I had finally reached a milestone. No debt, fully funded college accounts for both kids, and a growing savings fund for their future home deposits. With that weight off my shoulders, I decided to scale back my work hours, going from 74 hours a week to just 30. For the first time in years, I had time for myself. I used it to take a much-needed vacation, bringing my older son along for a road trip across the U.S. We bonded in a way I hadn't had the chance to in years. When I got back, I renovated our basement, turning it into a man cave, a space that felt like mine. I even started working out, playing sports, and generally focusing on my health. For the first time in ages, I felt like I was truly living. Eventually, I decided it was time to dip my toe into the dating world. Unlike Emily, I wasn't interested in casual flings. For me, intimacy starts with a connection. I wanted to meet someone I could talk to, laugh with, and share experiences with, not just a physical relationship. After a few underwhelming dates, I met Lauren. Lauren was everything I'd been missing. We went to concerts, art galleries, Comic-Cons, and movies. She made me laugh in a way I hadn't in years. And yes, our physical relationship was incredible too. For the first time since Emily's request, I felt seen and appreciated. But things took a turn when Emily started showing interest in my personal life. She began asking about my dates, which I found odd since we had an unspoken rule not to discuss these things. When I refused to share details, she became increasingly suspicious. One day, I caught her snooping through my phone. That led to a heated argument where I made it clear that my privacy was non-negotiable. Then came her bombshell. Emily told me she wanted to update the terms of our open marriage. Suddenly, she was interested in repairing our relationship. She suggested counseling, sharing a bedroom again, and spending more time together. On top of that, she wanted to limit our outside relationships to strictly physical encounters. No dates, no emotional connections. And insisted we start sharing details about our partners. Her demands felt like a complete reversal of everything she had pushed for 2 years ago. I told her I was content with the way things were. I didn't mind if she found someone to go out with. Hell, I even encouraged her to. But I wasn't interested in changing the dynamic now that I'd finally found a sense of balance. Emily is standing firm, though. She's adamant about trying to fix our marriage on her terms. And here I am, stuck between 2 options. Do I try to salvage this relationship for the sake of our history and our kids, or do I hand her the divorce papers and finally move on? I'm at a crossroads, and I could really use some advice. Second story. My wife wanted an open marriage out of nowhere, and it shattered everything I believed about our love. 7 hours ago, my wife shattered my world with just 5 words. I want an open marriage. Those words didn't just hang in the air, they ripped through every assumption I had about our life together. For the last few hours, I've been spiraling, trying to make sense of it all, and now I'm here, looking for advice, or at least a way to untangle the storm in my head. I'm 29, she's 33, and we've been married for 3 years, together for 5. We don't have kids yet, though we talked about it in the past. Throughout our relationship, my wife never once hinted at being interested in polyamory or an open relationship. If she had, I would have remembered. So, when she sat me down last night, I had no idea what was coming. It wasn't the usual tone she uses for a difficult conversation. It was different, heavier. She was visibly distressed, her eyes puffy and red, her hands trembling. When she finally spoke those 5 words, I froze. My mind raced to keep up as she started to explain. According to her, this feeling wasn't new. She confessed that throughout our relationship, there were times she'd felt a connection with other men, a spark of chemistry she'd ignored out of loyalty to me. She said she wanted to explore those feelings now because they'd been eating at her. Hearing this felt like a dagger to the chest, but the way she spoke, her broken voice, the tears streaming down her face, made it clear that this wasn't easy for her either. For a moment, I even felt sorry for her pain. But then came the flood of questions in my mind. Why now? Why after all these years? Why didn't she tell me this before we got married? She went on, telling me how she craves variety in ways I can't provide. She wasn't just talking about emotional connections. She meant sexually too. My confidence, already shaken, took another hit when she mentioned her past experiences. Before me, she'd had more partners, 21 to my 2. Some of those experiences included group sex, which I've never done. While I've never been the jealous type, this revelation made me feel inadequate in a way I'd never experienced before. When I asked for specifics, she hesitated but eventually admitted she wanted more frequent threesomes with 2 men, something she's always enjoyed. I offered to compromise by agreeing to this on occasion, but only if we could involve another woman sometimes. She quickly dismissed the idea, and I realized she wasn't interested in exploring my fantasies. Just hers. Then, she said something that hit me like a brick wall. She described feeling a void in her life, something she claimed had been there long before she met me. She believed opening our marriage would fill it. I was stunned. We've always shared everything, our dreams, fears, insecurities. At least, I thought we had. How could she hide something this massive from me? If she'd brought it up while we were dating, maybe we could have explored it together. But now, after years of monogamy and building a life together, it felt like a betrayal. I told her as much. I said monogamy is what I signed up for, what I'd built my entire life with her around. I admitted I wasn't sure I could handle opening our marriage. I told her I loved her deeply and wanted her to be happy, but I didn't know if I could go down this path with her. She pressed me for boundaries I'd want if we pursued this, but I could barely think straight. The few things I managed to articulate were simple. Our marriage would have to remain the primary relationship. Safe sex was non-negotiable. And under no circumstances could she get pregnant by another man. This last point led to an even more painful moment. She told me she wanted to try the open marriage before we started a family. That was it for me. My composure shattered. Up until then, I'd been holding it together. But hearing her push back the family we'd always talked about for this experiment was too much. I broke down in front of her for the first time in our marriage. She tried to comfort me, but I couldn't bear it. When she wrapped her arms around me, I felt suffocated. I pulled away and left the room. For the next hour, I wandered aimlessly around the house, avoiding her. I ended up in the bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror, replaying every word she'd said. When I was sure she'd gone to bed, I grabbed my keys and drove to my parents' house. I didn't wake them. I just sat in their living room, scrolling through articles and forums about polyamory, open marriages, and what they mean for relationships. And now, here I am, pouring my thoughts into this post while the sun rises. I called in sick to work because there's no way I can function today. I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into the abyss, with no idea what comes next. I love my wife more than anything, but I don't know if I can give her what she's asking for. Part of me feels like this might be the beginning of the end for us. If anyone has been through something similar or has advice, I could really use it right now. Third story. My fiancé's brother moved in, took advantage of me, and ruined my wedding. Then I called it off, and now he's demanding money for the reception dress. When I got engaged to my long-term boyfriend, Lucas, in July, I thought my life was finally falling into place. We had been together for years, building a relationship full of trust and love, or so I believed. After the proposal, we dove straight into wedding planning. Money was tight, but I'd been saving for this moment for a long time. Most of the expenses were coming out of my pocket, with Lucas contributing where he could. That was fine with me, as we were a team planning our future together. Lucas's brother Jake even offered to cover the cost of my reception dress. In my culture, it's customary to have a white gown for the ceremony and a traditional outfit for the reception. His generosity seemed like a kind gesture, and I was genuinely grateful. Little did I know it would soon come with strings attached. Jake had been staying with my parents and me for a few months by then. He bounced from place to place after being kicked out of his apartment and his uncle's house. Why? Because he was a peeping Tom. We took him in with the hope of helping him get back on his feet, but that turned out to be a huge mistake. From the moment he moved in, he took advantage of our kindness. Jake claimed my bedroom as his own, leaving me to sleep on the couch in my own house. He would sleep in so late that I couldn't even grab my clothes from my room until he finally decided to wake up. On top of that, after wrecking his car, he began driving mine to work without asking. This left me scrambling to hitch rides with a coworker, which added 2 hours to my daily commute. He didn't contribute a dime to rent or groceries either. It felt like he believed he was entitled to everything without lifting a finger. Things came to a boiling point when my dad, who had just been retrenched, put his foot down. He told Jake that it was unacceptable for me to be stuck catching lifts while Jake treated my car as his personal vehicle. My dad insisted that I take back my car and that Jake could Uber to work if he needed transportation. This confrontation finally pushed Lucas and Jake to take action. They decided to rent an apartment closer to Jake's work so he wouldn't have to pay for Uber rides. It seemed like a peaceful resolution at the time. Jake moved out, and I thought we could finally get some breathing room. But I was wrong. Shortly after Jake left, I started receiving angry phone calls from Lucas's family. Apparently, Jake had told them some twisted version of events where I'd kicked him out and left him with nowhere to go. Suddenly, I was being painted as the villain. Family members were calling me selfish and heartless for abandoning him in his time of need. In an effort to clear the air, my parents and I agreed to meet with Lucas, Jake, and their family to set the record straight. But when the day of the meeting came, Lucas didn't even bother to show up. When I called him to ask where he was, his response floored me. He said he knew we hadn't kicked Jake out, so it wasn't his problem. The meeting itself was a disaster. It quickly devolved into shouting matches and baseless accusations against me. By the end, I felt utterly defeated and humiliated. The lack of support from Lucas, combined with his family's toxic behavior, was the final straw for me. I realized I couldn't marry into a family that treated me like this, nor could I marry a man who wouldn't stand up for me when it mattered most. That night, I called off the wedding. I sent Lucas a message explaining my decision, but he never replied. Since then, he's ghosted me entirely. Now here's where things get even messier. Jake messaged me today, demanding that I pay him back for the reception dress he'd purchased. He gave me a deadline of 4 days to return the money. I told him no. I just paid double the cost of the dress to cancel our wedding venue, and I don't even have the dress in my possession. He does. I suggested he take it up with Lucas instead, but he wouldn't hear it. So now I'm left wondering if I did the right thing. Should I have handled things differently? Am I the one in the wrong here for refusing to pay Jake back? Or was calling off the wedding the only way to reclaim my sanity and self-respect? What do you think?